Before I give the floor to Adam to introduce our keynote speaker, my name is Bahman Mirshab. I'm Dean, College of Business Information Technology. I would like to recognize a few individuals here. All my colleagues in the College of Business Information Technology, can you please stand up? Mr. Steve Gregorian. Steve is president of Detroit Economic Club. Mr. Larry Forbes, a member of our advisory board. Mr. George Bond, president of Heritage Optical. At this time, I would like to introduce our president who would give a welcoming speech. President Motke.
Thank you, Dean. I love your surprises. But he's brought so much enthusiasm to our college and to our community. When I go to Detroit, there isn't a person that he meets that they did not know for each other for a long time. So he's a great citizen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to one of the Executive to Executive series, and today you have a real treat for you. A person who's an entrepreneur, innovator, a person who has made major impact in the city of Detroit and beyond. We are a private institution founded in Detroit on Highland Park, some of you who do not know, and on Model T plant. But Edsel and Henry Ford invited our founding dean to start a new university that will have theory and practice model, so that during Depression, 1932, factories were closed, 50% unemployment. He wanted education that can be applied immediately, and that's the founding of Lawrence Tech. We moved here in 1955, and College of Management, which transitioned into College of Business and Information Technology, has been a major draw because of, even if you're an engineer or architect, you want to do business and have your own firm, and College of Business has been on the front line to do that. And today we have a businessman or business personality whose impact is huge and beyond city of Detroit. With that, I take leave of you and thank you very much for coming here to this place. If it is your first visit, please come again. We'd love to have you here. Enjoy. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Counts from Plant Moran, and I have the pleasure of introducing Matt Cullen. He's a principal of Rock Ventures LLC, the Detroit-based organization that serves and connects entrepreneur and Quicken Loans founder Dan Gilbert, as well as his investments, real estate purchases, and community activities. Matt helps lead Rock Ventures' efforts to spark development and revitalization in the city of Detroit. I'm sure if you've been in the city lately, you've seen some of Matt's handiwork as part of the redevelopment. Since then, the family of companies has invested and committed more than $5.6 billion with a B in real estate in the city's urban core, which has been a catalyst for attracting new businesses, workers, and residents to the city. Matt's a 29-year veteran of General Motors, where he was the general manager of economic development and enterprise services. In addition to coordinating economic development initiatives in the communities in which GM operates, he created a shared services organization and has had responsibility for the corporation's vast 450 million square foot global real estate portfolio. Matt was chief architect of GM's $500 million acquisition and development of the Renaissance Center. If anybody's been downtown, you've seen the Renaissance Center. Since 2003, he has helped oversee the $1 billion with a B redevelopment of the city's international riverfront as the founding chairman of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, whose vision is to create more than 5 miles of contiguous public access and linked parks along the river. Please welcome me in joining Matt Cullen up to the stage.
Thank you, Adam, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you, share a little bit of what's taking place in the city of Detroit. It's great to be with two organizations that have been so active in the city, too. I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about connectivity. I'll do it in the context of sort of physical connectivity, because that's, I'm sort of a real estate guy at heart, and a lot of the things that are taking place in the city of Detroit reflect sort of I think the power of connectivity. For a long period of time in the city, we tried to do these one-off projects, the Renaissance Center or Harbor Town or different things, but they weren't connected. There wasn't a lot of energy associated with them, and I think as a result, they didn't quite have the same kind of impact that what is taking place today does. So I'll talk about the physical connectivity, but also certainly it's about connectivity of sort of organizations and people, and certainly LTU has been in the forefront of that. I mean, we were recounting some of the stories earlier where we had some of the design charrettes and things like that way back with Lawrence Technology University, and they came down to the boulevard and they put investment down there. They had charrettes on Woodward, and Plant Moran's been very much in the forefront of it as well. So it's great to be here with folks like that. And it's great to be here with a lot of the nonprofit leaders that are pulling things together in the city, because what we have found is, and I think it's not like a lesson unique to us, but we're much more impactful as a community when we have business, government, and philanthropy lined up. That hasn't always been the case. In fact, it was certainly not the case for a long period of time. But I think it's really that sort of synergy that has allowed us to create a lot of the momentum that we have right now. So I want to take you through sort of the eyes of the physical development what's taking place, touch on people and some of the characteristics of growth within the city, and then also going to talk about some of the physical connectivity that I mentioned. So a lot of it will be through the eyes of sort of Rock and Quicken, but it's a broad group of people and a broad group of organizations that's pulling this together. So my pronouns will probably get confused at some point during the process, so forgive me for that. Spend maybe a second talking about Quicken and Dan Gilbert decision, and I'll talk about this, but made to come down to Detroit in 2010. Dan's has a universe of about 110 different companies. Quicken is sort of the foundational company there, but a lot of different things with gaming and real estate and football helmets and everything in between. So when Dan made a commitment to come down to the city, it was with a focus of bringing all of the energy of all of these different organizations and having an impact on the city. So that will be kind of woven throughout my remarks as well. This group doesn't really need the history lesson, but we had a lot of challenges in the city of Detroit. So I was born in 1956, which makes me an old guy now. But literally almost from the year I was born, the city population went down. The challenges within the city have become increasingly significant. And it was a challenging time, and I think it kind of culminated in this Time magazine article in 2009 that analogized this to New Orleans, where they had the hurricane, right? And so we were kind of the unnatural disaster in the city of Detroit. We had a lot of things going against us at the time. It was really against that backdrop that we made a decision. Dan and the team made a decision to come down. But there was articles like this. And it was the ghost town of Detroit. It was all of the negative things that were taking place. And then it kind of culminated in 2013 with the bankruptcy. And a lot of folks have talked a lot about the bankruptcy. And for many, probably around the world, we had people coming in literally from around the world to want to ask about, hey, how did it get so bad, and how did you guys get so screwed up? And yet, ironically, by 2013, for those of us that were here, the city was well on its way back. I mean, we had bottomed out several years earlier, and the bankruptcy, in a way, was really just a key step that people had taken to recognize that we had been financially insolvent for decades. People hadn't been willing to step up to that and acknowledge it. And it was that recognition and the ability to do that, the emergency manager, the new mayor, the new government, and that kind of thing that really allowed us to move forward quickly. So now we're getting kind of different headlines, right? We're the only city of design by UNESCO. I'll talk about that a little bit more. We're one of the top places to visit in 2017 and 2018, New York Times. I mean, these are the people that were saying, that the city was gone and could be kind of buried. Toronto Star. Just a terrific renaissance in a real sense, and the things that are taking place are amazing. And as a result, we competed pretty effectively, I would say, for an Amazon proposal. Now, we didn't get it, and in many ways, that's probably just as well, given what has played out. But we put together a video for that pitch.
When you've been a leader your entire life, you learn how to turn one day into day one, to do it first, to be an innovator, means you may stumble, you may fall, but relentless, you will move forward. Detroiters are born moving. Our wings have a deep history. Our roads pave the way for every future highway of tomorrow. An international hub full of vitality, of Michigan strength, from the global reach of techno and Motown to the powerful rev of our engines. From style trends to technology, Detroit is the starting line of the world's imagination. We are always shaping, moving, cultivating what's next. We are small business savvy and billion-dollar business bold. A state full of 230-foot pine trees and the summer destination of the monarch butterfly. Surrounded by the beauty of Great Lakes. Detroit is always growing, always in flight. We don't wait for someone else to do it. We don't have time to stand still. Not everyone will understand our pace, but the baton was placed in our hands, so we're finishing strong. If this is home, you own the pearl. If you move here, you move the world. Who else to design the mobility of tomorrow besides the most resilient people on the planet? From custom-made bikes and shiny rims, autonomous vehicles and alternative energy. Mobility as a right in diverse cultural communities. Our land, the foundation of collective still Michigan hands, holding up families, designing possibility, creating space. We are the solutionaries, forging our way toward the answers, a sacred historical place, fearlessly stepping up to the plate. We are infinite possibility, and our future can't wait. Detroiters have always kept this country moving. Our DNA connected to a passionate work ethic, and authenticity we earn from grandfathers and free-thinking mothers we watch with hard hat and toolbox swagger, sculpt art into dinner for our families. Born on an assembly line of artists, thinkers, educators, scientists, coaches, and philanthropists, we are Southern class and clean Cadillacs, humility and matter of fact. We are a century-old farmers market, the heart and soul of this country's future, the steady sound of design and innovation, and a whole other country is just a bridge away. Dream chasers built Detroit. This is the world city. Design here, design the world. Build here, you'll build the world. Create here, create the world. Move here, move the world.
Yeah, I think just, and I know some of the students are here from Southfield, I think, as well, but it just is a different feeling to the city of Detroit now. I mean, people feel, again, like they probably did when we were kids. I mean, they feel proud of the city, they feel excited about the opportunities, and they feel like we're creating a community where our young folks, our kids, our neighbors' kids, and so on, are going to have the opportunity to stay here in Detroit and create a future here, as opposed to moving away in order to do that. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So in 2010, we came down, we sort of, Rock and Dan and myself, I've been working in the city of Detroit for a long time. I had been working on the revitalization of the city of Detroit for a long time. That's how I got to know Dan and chose to join him. And we kind of came down with a philosophy of doing good and doing well. I mean, we wanted to be a part of the revitalization of our city. It was our hometown. It was very obviously critically important to us. But we also thought we could do well. I mean, this is sort of a business session as well. And we felt like we could, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that we could come down and we could buy buildings inexpensively, that we could invest, and we could make financial returns appropriate with the level of risk. And so we kind of created that mantra, didn't create it, but adopted the mantra of doing good and doing well. And that's been something we've been paying attention to a lot ever since. I think Adam mentioned in the beginning relative to the real estate. I mean, so that's kind of the most physical or obvious characteristic of our investment here, but it's really not, the only one. Certainly, the jobs has been incredible. We'll talk about the jobs growth, and then again we'll talk about the connectivity of people and places, which I think is really important. Our real estate growth from the time we came down in 2010 has been amazing. We're up to $5.6 billion now in investment. I'll talk a lot more about what we're doing in the future, but that doesn't include things like Hudson's and Monroe and the Book Tower. I mean, billions of dollars of additional investment. So it's been a tremendous amount of investment, a wide array of different types of properties that we've invested in, and I think they have made a lot of the difference. 16 million square feet and 330 total tenants. So it's one thing to be a real estate developer and to buy buildings and buy them inexpensively, but the key to it really has been filling those buildings up and creating the energy of what's taking place downtown. So I'll stick with the real estate for a second. What was really, you saw that UNESCO made us as the only city of design in the United States. I mean, we kind of had an interesting circumstance where for, sort of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where a lot of the communities across the country knocked down their old buildings and put up these sort of ubiquitous glass buildings. We didn't do that. Now, the good news is we didn't do that. The bad news is we didn't do it because there wasn't a lot of economic demand, right? So a lot of these buildings were literally abandoned in place. This is the old Madison Theater building. And Ross Sanders is here, and he was involved with this building from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And so this building had been empty for 25 years. We came in, we converted it into probably the coolest high-tech incubator space in the country, and it's been reported that way a lot of places across the United States. Chrysler House, another really cool old building. It used to be the Dime Bank building. And you can see the kind of spaces on the right-hand side that we're able to create for our young workforce. I mean, so we have this incredible architecture, and we have some great design people that are converting that into very efficient, very modern office space, but with a level of detail and design that you just couldn't get anywhere. And we're putting new on top of that. So when we're coming back in now, the Shinola Hotel, which just opened kind of the beginning of the year, the San Marello restaurant, if you haven't been down there, I mean, it's unbelievable. This thing's getting written up around the country. And in this instance, this was 3 or 4 of the existing old buildings that go back more than 100 years, and then some infill construction as well. So we're capturing the great buildings and the great design, and we're trying to amplify that. This gives you a sense of that. The sort of the second building to the right is the infill building, but other than that, those buildings were there. And you can see the incredibly sort of modern, fun space that's being created on the left-hand side of your screen there. Retail, 10 years ago, there might have been a Foot Locker on Woodward. I mean, that was kind of it, right? There was no stores. There was nothing to do in downtown Detroit from a retail standpoint at all. And when we came down, we said, look, we want to turn Woodward Avenue to Michigan Avenue, Chicago. Obviously a little aspirational from where we started, but we really thought that if we did it right, if we cultivated and curated the right kind of tenants in there, that we could have a tremendous impact. And that's turned out to be the case. I mean, Warby Parker was one of the early ones. I shouldn't show that, George, should I, Warby Parker? I mean, or George says, okay, all right. So it's not Heritage Optical, it's already downtown, so I'll make note of that. Nike came down, and then Nike's on there, and it's like, okay, well, Under Armour has to come down. The H&M was just announced, the clothing store. I mean, the amount of retail that's starting to take place on Woodward is incredible. And then restaurants. I think I was talking to Steve or somebody, but there were no restaurants. I mean, 10 years ago, if somebody came into town and said, hey, where should I go to dinner? I mean, you would say Opus maybe, or Rattlesnake, or Lafayette Coney Island. I mean, there was not a whole lot of choices, right? And in any price point, but certainly sort of at the higher end. Not the case anymore. I mean, the restaurant scene in Detroit is amazing, and what's taking place. I mean, we're being written up around the country as a foodie paradise, which is like so far from what it used to be. It's amazing. But I could have page after page of the new restaurants that are taking place down here. I've hit most of them, but not all of them. And it's just, it's tremendous fun. And it's funny because, when there aren't any restaurants, you could walk right in and get a reservation. And now there's 50 of them and another one opening every week. And you have to call 2 weeks in advance to get reservations. I mean, you could add Park and Wright & Company, and I mean, you guys all have your own list, but it's great fun seeing what's taking place there. And then residential. I mean, Detroit's never been a residential downtown. I mean, we always were a business downtown and you know, expansive neighborhoods. And so it's quite different now as we start, people really want to start living downtown. And we're doing a lot of things to try and accommodate that. In general in the city, the real estate values went up for the first time in 17 years. That was in a headline in 2018. But so residential throughout the city is certainly in sort of the prime neighborhoods is appreciating very rapidly. And residential downtown, the same thing is happening. City Modern is sort of Brush Park, if people are more familiar with that term. So this is the area right around north of Comerica Park. I mean, it had been a vibrant residential neighborhood for a long time ago, but it had been essentially abandoned. There was nothing left there except a few of the historic mansions which had fallen into disrepair. So we went in there and we've been converting it into much more sort of appropriate urban living, kind of mid-density, you know, very diverse from mixed income, from affordable to near luxury. It's going terrifically well. The product is coming online already, and we have a waiting list to get in there. And then jobs. So, you know, talk just a little bit about the real estate. Could talk a lot more. I'm sorry, the real estate and residential. Could talk more about it. I mean, we actually have a micro loft now, which is really pretty interesting. So you never would have thought it was necessary in the city of Detroit, but pricing has gone up downtown, and to the point that we want to make sure that people have the opportunity to live there. And so one way to do that is we actually have created these micro lofts. They're only 265 square feet, so, you know, kind of half the size of this stage maybe. And but that allows people to live down there, and it really reflects the kind of living style that a lot of the young folks particularly like now, because it's almost like a grown-up's dorm, right? Because you don't have a lot of room in your own kind of place where you sleep, but there's a lot of communal space, communal kitchens, communal activities. So it's been exciting for us to see that kind of change as well. I talked about real estate, but I mean, like we said, you know, the energy doesn't come from the cool real estate; it comes from the people that are in it. And we came downtown in 2010 with 1,700 people, so that's, you know, that was sort of our main influx of people from a rock standpoint. And then we followed with a couple of other waves. We came up with about 3,000 people. That's how many people we had in round numbers that lived in our in sort of the region at the time. Today in Detroit, Rock Ventures, Dan Gilbert's enterprises have 17,000 team members that work in Detroit. And importantly, nearly 3,400 of those live in the city. And so 20% of those live in the city. That number is going up all the time. And that's terrific news. I mean, people really want to be downtown. They want to live, work, and play down there. And another sort of subset number of that is, of the 3,400 that live in the city, about 50% of them have lived in the city their entire lives. So we're able to also recruit from the city and to bring people in that are city residents and make opportunities for them as well. So that's something that we're excited about and proud of. And we have, you know, the magic sauce to our success is our people. We have the best group of team members anywhere. That's allowed us to scale from 3,000 people to 17,000 people in Detroit. And we're excited to be doing it with a lot of Detroiters. Again, I mentioned the students from Southfield schools, I think Southfield High. One of the things that we have found as a company is that we need to continue to expose our company to the youth of America, really. And so we have about 2,000 interns on an annual basis associated with our company, which is a phenomenal number. And it's terrific because we get these young folks that, you know, primarily college age, that come in and they share their talents. We expose them to all the great things that are taking place obviously within Rock and Quicken, right? Because we're expanding like crazy, so we need that talent. But we also expose them to all the cool things that are taking place in the city. I mean, we connect them with all the other interns. We take them to the DIA, we take them to the ball game, we take them to everything else so they can see what's taking place in the city. And that's been tremendous success. I mean, Dan would tell you that that's probably the initiative that has been most impactful to allow us to scale. And it also showcases for people a very different city of Detroit. I mean, most people had the picture of the Time magazine still in their minds when they talk about Detroit. And that's not just kids from Schaumburg outside of Chicago, that's kids from Clarkston or Flushing or something else that they just had never come down to the city of Detroit. They had a very negative image of it, and there was no way they were ever going to contemplate it for a career. And you get them down there and you show them what's going on, and that changes pretty quickly, and that's been very helpful for us and for others that are trying to recruit into Detroit. Tremendous number of companies that have been recruited as well, and this kind of continues. I should have Plant Moran on here. I did a bad job on my chart today, but lots of different companies are coming down. It's becoming really a high-tech hub. You don't read, you don't go for a day or two without seeing Microsoft just announce something coming down. I mean, a tremendous influx of talent. I mean, it's becoming a very high-tech oriented hub, and sort of the banks and the tech companies and those kinds of things, the law firms. I mean, everybody is looking to flock into downtown now. And after literally decades of all of those same people leaving, and it's great now to see that kind of momentum. And they belong downtown. I mean, we succeed as a region, but a lot of those companies are anchored on the millennials and the young folks and the tech people, and they want to be in an urban area. That's just a fact, and they may ultimately move to Southfield or Grosse Pointe or something else to live and raise their family, but as workers, they want to be in a place with a lot of action. The other kind of, so I talked about real estate, I talked about people. I want to talk a little bit about connectivity. And this is particularly appropriate sort of with all of the people, the nonprofits and the things that you guys are doing to lead what's taking place in the community. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have these cool buildings downtown and the buildings are full, but everybody comes out of that building, gets in their car and drives back to the suburbs or something, nothing happened, right? And so when we really started to spend a lot of time of figuring out, hey, how do we get people out of the buildings, interacting with each other? That's where the energy comes from. That's where the excitement comes from. That's where a lot of the smart ideas come from. And so we actually recruited some of the best placemakers and urban design folks around the world to help us put that together. And I want to give you an example of a few of those. Campus Martius Park. This was, I don't know, 20 years ago maybe. Maybe a little bit longer than that. No, 20 years ago. So we did this in 2002, 2003. So this is what it looked like. It was kind of a big bus stop, is really what Campus Martius Park was. It had been a historic park. It had been essentially sort of let go, put politely. You can see there's no CompuWare building there. It was not much to it, and that has been redeveloped into what now is recognized around the country and has been awarded as such as one of the most vibrant urban parks in the United States. And it is, morning, noon, or night, regardless of the weather, there's people out there that are having a ton of fun. They're skating, they're listening to music, they're doing all kinds of different things out there. The park restaurant is there now. We have a tiki bar. The key to success on public space is tiki bars, you guys. If you take nothing else away from this lesson, you make sure that you have tiki bars, because but it's just a lot of fun and energy, and a big sandbox for the kids, and it really has changed the very heart of the city with the tree lighting and all the things that we have going on down there. This gives you a sense of that. When we have people come in from around the country and around the world to talk about what's going on in Detroit, you show them that picture and you say, where is it? And they immediately think it's Rockefeller Center or somewhere in New York or something. And that was the tree lighting this year. So you can see the kind of energy and activity that's taking place in the heart of the city. CADILLAC Square is right next to it. It's just a tremendous amount of activity there. And it's interesting, we have volleyball there, and we have basketball there, and we have all kinds of other things. We have holiday markets and those kinds of things. And when we first started talking about having basketball down there, I mean, the current thinking was, hey, we don't need that many teenagers, and we don't need that much activity and that kind of thing. But we wanted to create an environment for everybody. So we created a skate park, and we created a basketball court, and we did those kinds of things. And it's been tremendously successful. And people come down there, and they're respectful, and they enjoy it, and it's a great, addition to the neighborhood, and we've been really excited about how that's been playing out. Beacon Park, our friends at DTE, they were kind of in an industrial side of downtown, and there wasn't much taking place at all. People had absolutely no reason to come out of that building to do anything. And as they invested a lot in the building, but they still kind of had that, I'll call it like an institutional kind of feel to the neighborhood. Well, Jerry Anderson and Dave Meader and the team said, we're going to change that. So they bought up some property, and they created Beacon Park and the Lumen Restaurant. And suddenly, the east side of downtown, if you will, is really just taken off. And if you haven't been down there, it's a lot of fun, and make sure you get down there this summer. They have movies during the winter. They have all kinds of things going on. This sort of probably is the greatest example of connectivity and change in the city. So this is an alley. We call it a belt now because it's cool, but it used to be an alley. And it's an alley behind the Shinola Hotel, and it's behind sort of the activities that are taking place there. And it now has become a very happening place. You got the Skip. They got the Belt. They've got a number of different restaurants and activities. They've got art stores and galleries and all kinds of things. And it becomes a physical connector and a place where people hang out and enjoy each other. The Q line is another form of connectivity, right? So we embarked on this several years ago. Roger Penske's the chair, and Dan's vice chair, and I think I'm the CEO. I'd rather be chair, because CEO, you actually got to do work, which so I got to make a note of that for my future volunteer efforts. But it's come together really well. We raised all the money for this project philanthropically, and it goes, the joke here is it actually goes 3.3 miles, but Dan makes me say 6.6 because it goes both ways. So he's a marketing guy, and he says it's you should give yourself more credit. So it's 6.6 miles, 12 stops along the corridor, $140 million capital cost. This chart says $7 billion. It actually has $8 billion worth of economic development from the time we broke ground on it in 2013. So it's been great relative to the impact in that regard. I'll show you this map, and it's really not to make any particular sense out of it, except that this was one done by Cranes a couple of years ago. Every dot on here is a parcel that changed hands from the time that we locked in and committed to move forward on the Q line in 2013, and this was through 2017. So what it's saying is, essentially, once that commitment was made to have a fixed rail that people knew was going to be there long term, tremendous investment followed, and that continues. I mean, I kind of grew up in the kind of North End News Center when I was with General Motors, and it was really a pretty tired out, sort of isolated area. But once this came, the development there has been tremendous, and suddenly all that connectivity starting to take place, and we've had some operational things that we're working to improve. But it's gone very well, and there's actually a lot of interest in expanding it up into the North End and elsewhere within the city. I mean, transit, it's not going to be rail everywhere, but transit in general is going to be a key component of us being successful going forward. I'll pivot over and talk about the riverfront a little bit. It's one that's near and dear to my heart. When we bought the Renaissance Center in 1996, you could not walk out of the Renaissance Center to the riverfront. It's not any further than from here to that hallway, and you couldn't walk there. I mean, there's 3 levels of road, abandoned parking lots. There was literally no way to move that distance. And we looked across, so I was high up in the tower, and we looked across and saw Windsor and saw the really cool things that are taking place there. We saw what was taking place on waterfronts and riverfronts around the country, around the world, and we had waterfront envy when we looked at those. It's like, why can't we do that? And why is it so bad here? I mean, because it was bad. And we said we want to create a world-class gathering place. We want to take advantage of one of the coolest rivers. I mean, if you've been to San Antonio on the Riverwalk, I mean, it's a lovely town, and it's a cool place. but the river isn't from here to the wall, right? I mean, so, and so it doesn't really give you, it's kind of like, feels like a creek walk than a river walk at places. No disrespect to anybody in San Antonio, because it's a cool place, but we have a much cooler river, and so how could we try and take place, and how could we make it a place where everybody felt welcome? I mean, we didn't want this to be, you know, a General Motors sort of river walk or a business community river walk. We wanted it to be for everybody. So we've been able to do that. We had over 3 million visitors last year. We have 150,000 people come down for River Days. We have 80,000 in run and walks, and you can't go down there from May to November without, you know, some 5K walk or something, and half of the nonprofits in here probably do them down there. We like to partner with everybody in that regard. We bring a lot of kids down for reading and rhythm. And tremendous economic development. I mean, remember, do good and do well, right? I mean, that's, you can make that kind of statement, not just about businesses, but about nonprofit interventions. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, there needs to be sustainability, there needs to be economic impact. And so we're well over $1 billion in economic impact as a result of the riverfront, $45 million of annual spend, and a tremendous amount of spending in place. So this is what it was. So this is only 20 years ago now, and this is looking out my office window, looking east towards Belle Isle. You can see that sort of green thing in the background, that's Belle Isle. This is what our riverfront looked like. You couldn't, I mean, there's certainly no reason to go there and to visit. That's Atwater Street, that road there that you probably needed. I think that's why General Motors bought Hummer, just so you could ride up and down that street, because you certainly couldn't do it in any kind of normal coupe or something. So, so we said, look, we think we could change that. We cleared all that out. We created these different plazas. We created this perpetual access. Here's the GM Plaza. So this is when I said we bought it. You couldn't walk out of the Renaissance Center, and so you couldn't get to the water. And so we changed that, right? So we created the Winter Garden to connect back to the connectivity. We wanted to connect the building to the waterfront. We took down those big ugly berms in front. We did all that kind of thing to connect it into the community. And then we created great spaces that people want to come down and enjoy, and it's worked out really well. Cullen Plaza, because my wife and I supported the plaza here, so we're very proud of that. So this is a view kind of from the east side looking west towards the Renaissance Center, and this is what it looks like today. I mean, it's just a spectacular place, and ultimately we're going to create 5.5 miles of this. Okay, so we're really near the end, and I'll talk about it more in a second, of our first phase, which is, think of it from Joe Louis to Gabriel Richard Park, over by Belle Isle. That's 3.5 miles. Now we're turning our attention to the west, and so we're going to go from Joe Louis all the way beyond the Ambassador Bridge. And so we're going to have 5.5 miles of perpetual public access and connectivity, and that's driving, as you would expect, tremendous economic development now, because everyone's like, hey, I want to live down there, and I want to go to the restaurant down there, and I want to have a drink looking out at the water and so on. So we got a lot of action. Here's Gabriel Richard Park. This is kind of an existing park. It feels a little bit like Campus MARTIUS. So this was an existing park, but nobody ever had occasion to go there. So this is immediately east of the MacArthur Bridge at Belle Isle. And this is what it looked like just a few years ago. And here's what it looks like today. And it's just a spectacular place that people can come down and enjoy in a variety of different ways. DEQUINDRE Cut. We bought the Rensen. Prior to that, this actually was a rail line, and there actually was a rail that came to the Renaissance Center, for those of you that go back even a couple of years more than I do. But by the time we got there, this is what it looked like, and you certainly had no occasion to go down here at all, right? And so this was a connector from the riverfront up into the neighborhoods all the way to Eastern Market, but it looked like this. And so we took it over, and we created this incredible public space now that ties into Lafayette Park and all the different neighborhoods up to Eastern Market, now all the way to Mack Avenue, so kids can get on their bikes at Wayne State and come on a 25 miles of uninterrupted greenway around Belle Isle and everything else. So we're really proud about that. So that's sort of, place, people, and connectivity today. Let me talk a little bit about the future. We're under construction on the MONROE block. So this is we being Rock in this instance, in BEDROCK. So we are going to build a million square foot, sort of $1 billion development on the MONROE block. And the MONROE block is, if you're facing the CompuWare building, if you will, staying on campus MARTIUS, it's immediately to your right. It's just a parking lot now. And it's going to be a tremendous, tremendous development. We're really excited about that. The iconic site in the city of Detroit, the Hudson's building, everybody knew it. The kids in the back, you guys didn't know it because it came down about 15, 20 years ago, but it was the department store where everybody went to. Everybody's got a story of seeing Santa and so on. It was the place to gather in the city. I think in a lot of ways when we took it down, it took a little bit of the heart out of the city of Detroit, but the heart's coming back. We're building this incredible new development there. It's under construction right now, so if you go down there, you'll see a big hole in the ground, but it won't be very long before you're going to see a lot of steel coming out of the ground and a tremendous tower. So the building in the foreground is going to be office and retail and community gathering space, and then the tower in the background is going to be the best and the coolest residential development in the history of Detroit. That tower in the background is going to be taller than the Renaissance Center, and so it's really kind of hard for us to think about. Again, back to 10 years ago, that somebody would be building in Detroit, brand new, ground up skyscrapers, let alone something taller than the Renaissance Center. So it's pretty aspirational, and we're really excited about it. You see kind of, again, it's all about connectivity. It's all about inviting people in. It's all about getting people, to come in and out of the street and engage in the retail, and it's a $900 million construction cost. I mean, I think that it might be an old number. I would wish it was $900 million, but it's probably a little north of that. It's 800 feet tower, 100,000 square feet of retail, office space, and then the residential units that I mentioned. The Illiches are hard at work on District Detroit, and I know there was an article that wasn't really great last week in Cranes, but there's a lot of good things happening, and they're going to continue to get that done. So that kind of fills in the piece immediately north of downtown. This is some of the projects that they're working on there, including the new Wayne State Business School and Microsoft and other things. Brewster Douglas was a site kind of right at the junction of 75 and 375 there. We, Rock, with a number of partners, have just acquired that, and we're working on a mixed-use residential development with a tremendous amount of affordable residential in this area. So the density of the residential and the mixed income approach to it is coming to the forefront. We're really excited about this project. Our train station, so sort of the iconic building that, if you want ruined porn, they'd show you the train station, right? And for many, many, many years, it was abandoned and sitting there. Ford's decision to buy it and to turn it into their autonomous vehicle hub is just incredible. And I was with some of the folks from Ford yesterday. I mean, their plans continue to be amazing, and they're really going to change that entire end of the city. I mean, the whole Corktown, Mexican town, Southwest Detroit, I mean, is exploding from a development standpoint. So that's really cool to see. GRATIOT site, I've spent a lot of my time lately on this famous jail site. It's kind of the gateway to downtown. You come down 375, you get off at the Madison exit there, and there had been a series of sort of jails and criminal justice projects that had been there for 50 or 60 years that were quite dated and probably didn't belong in that area anymore. And so then the county got started on a project to replace the jail. They got over their skis, I guess I'll say, in a technical real estate term, where the project had vast overruns. They weren't going to be able to finish it. It was a real mess. So we came in, we Rock, and we're building a criminal justice complex, brand new, just a couple miles north on 75. And then this site is going to be a tremendous new development site. And we are, so think of it like this, big mixed-use site coming right into the heart of the downtown. And we have some really interesting things that we're working on this site. So you probably may well hear some announcements on this site over the course of the next bit of time. It's going to take us a while to build the other project and to move, but we're really excited about how this is coming together. River East, I mean, so I showed you sort of what was taking place. I mean, now what could take place in the future. General Motors is visioning what, you know, so those parking lots to the east of the Renaissance Center were always intended to be development sites. General Motors is getting very excited about possible developments there, and so this just gives you a rendering of what that might look like, but significant office and residential development along the East Riverfront. Atwater Beach, so a little further east now. We are under construction with this. It's going to be open this year. A brand new sort of development with a barge. You know, you think of a food truck. We're going to have a food barge with drinks and food right on the edge of the river, with a big beach for the kids to play in, have access to a lot of the different activities that are taking place here, and again, start connecting the entire Riverwalk. So that's a big deal for us. Here's another rendering of it, kind of in the right corner of it there. You see that red building, which is sort of where the barge will be, and then you see the idea of the beach and so on. So volleyball, a great playscape, a lot of things taking place there for the kids to enjoy. And then I want to pivot for a second to the West Riverfront. So, West Riverfront was as ugly as the East. There was nothing over there. It was a free press printing plant. It was a bunch of railroad lines. It was pretty much abandoned. And so we, the Conservancy, have raised the money to do the East. Now we're working on the West. And we just had, and I'll talk about more in just a second, but the Ralph Wilson Foundation just gave us a tremendous grant to get us going on this, a $50 million grant. And so we are embarking to build this park on the West Riverfront. And it's going to be tremendous. It's going to be, we're going to be connected. So those of you that are familiar with the geography, if we're at Joe Louis, right, which is where the east ends, that building, the arena is going to be knocked down this year by the state. So that's going to be a development site. And then there's a parking lot there that we have the rights to go across. And then Riverfront Apartments, which we now have negotiated as well. We be in the Riverfront Conservancy, the ability to go on the water side there. And then we're going to end up at this park. And it's going to be one of the best parks. It's going to be like Millennial Park. It's going to be like Maggie Daley Park. It's going to be a park that people around the country are going to come see. And kids from around our region are going to drag their parents and grandparents to go check out. So here's the, there's going to be an actual cove with a beach where you can swim. And this will be an element of it. It'll be obviously summer swimming, winter ice skating. Here gives you a different image of it. You see the downtown in the background. You see the cove. You see the cylindrical kind of thing over there on the left foreground. That's going to be David Adjaye, who's one of the preeminent, Sir David Adjaye, most preeminent architects in the world, is designing a sports pavilion there. It's going to have a playscape of great interest sort of at the top of this picture. So this is, it's going to really be the anchor for what's taking place on the entire waterfront. It will be under construction by next year, and we'll have it open by 2022. So this stuff isn't, the stuff I'm showing you isn't, hey, wouldn't it be cool? This stuff is things that are underway and we're going to get done. I mentioned just from a connectivity standpoint and from a philanthropic standpoint, I mean, Ralph Wilson, who was a Detroiter who made his wealth in Buffalo and owned the Bills and so on, sold the team when he passed away, and all that money went into a foundation, the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation. And they came back to our community, if you will, and are the anchor grantor for this park. So it's exciting to see how all of that comes back together. What I'm going to do now, if I do this properly, is so what I thought I'd do now is kind of finish with a bit of a flyover. So the flyover will give you a sense as to all of these buildings that we just talked about are real. I mean, they're all underway. They're all coming, and we put together a video. So you saw sort of the emotional, sort of upbeat version of, hey, we are Detroit in the beginning, and now I want to give you sort of a more sort of specific flyover, a virtual reality of what the city is going to look like. So that's it. I kind of want to share with you the excitement that we have about all the great things that are taking place down here. The momentum is incredible. I've mentioned we had $5.6 billion under construction, or that we've invested so far. We probably have another $2 or $3 billion. I could have shown you 10 more buildings underway, 10 more buildings that others are doing as well. But the pace quickens, I guess, pun intended. The pace is really picking up. It's amazing what's taking place, and we're tremendously excited about it. We spend a lot of time trying to make sure that there's opportunity for everybody as we do that. We want to make sure that that's the case. And we spend a lot of time with helping out with the trade schools and different things, because the amount of construction here is unprecedented in our history, and we want to make sure that it's not just people coming in that have that opportunity, but people that are here. So we spend a lot of time on that as well. So with that, let me sort of end my remarks, and I think the arrangement is for some Q&A perhaps after that. So thank you for being here, and then I'm happy to take up any questions that anybody has.
Let's give Matt a round of applause real quick.
Thank you.
And then we'll open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions for Matt right now?
Thank you. Great job. I'm really excited. I'm a lifelong Detroiter. Grew up in Detroit, high school in Detroit, college in Detroit. So I've been here for a long, long time, and I still do work in Detroit. So great job. Just a couple of questions when you talk about connectivity. Is there any considerations at this time to connectivity to the former City of Detroit Airport, and/or are there any plans for renovation or expansion of what we know now as the People Mover?
Sure, two great questions. I guess I'll have to hang by the mic a little bit. A lot of people have been talking about the airport as to what to do with it, and it's certainly dramatically underutilized today, right? So the mayor has had a lot of ideas about it, but I can't tell you there's anything really specific right now. Ironically, as the city develops, there's starting to be more demand on the airport again, so perhaps it can become more viable again. It has a short runway, so they've never really been able to get great commercial use out of there, because it only has one runway or in one direction, and it's relatively short. And so if the wind's a crosswind, then there's a problem with landing there and so on. People have had a lot of different ideas relative to development, and my guess is a site that big, that close, will come back into productive reuse. I didn't even mention, and I digress just for a second on your question, but I didn't even mention the Fiat Chrysler announcement the other day, because that's amazing too. So that site could be available for something like that as well. I don't know what the highest and best use is, but the Fiat Chrysler thing on the east side, 5,000 new jobs and $4 or $5 billion worth of development. So it's hard to keep this thing current. But so no plans that I'm aware of yet, but a lot of people talking about that site. The second one was the People Mover. I mean, the People Mover isn't really designed for an expansion. I mean, it was sort of I guess I'd call it dated sort of construction with the loop. I mean, so people have looked at it at different times, but it's pretty expensive. So my guess is, and because of the nature of it, if the loop becomes too long, and you're 25 minutes on a loop, then people wouldn't use it because it couldn't get them back to where they wanted to go. So anyway, probably not, but transit in general, including modest expansions of the streetcar and bus and rubber wheel trolleys and things like that, I think you'll see a lot of it.
Any other questions?
I also have two questions. There's a lot going on downtown, but there's huge expanses of the city that are not being developed. And the other thing is, I also grew up in Detroit, and it's been my feeling for a long time that until you get the schools fixed, real people aren't going to want to live there. And have you got any thoughts on that?
Sure. So, I mean, the first comment, you're absolutely right. 90% of what I just showed you is in an area of less than 10 square miles. Okay, so if you go kind of go expressway to expressway and the riverfront up to the boulevard or something, it's and you know, expand a little bit from there, it's 10 square miles. The city's 140 square miles around numbers, so that leaves a lot of the city, right, that we need to work on. I mean, a lot of it, significant areas are coming back. The premium neighborhoods, if you will. I grew up in Rosedale Park, so I mean, I'm biased, but it's a premium neighborhood. But you know, Indian Village, I mean, Sherwood Forest, Palmer Park, they're coming back fast. The mayor's putting a lot of resources, as is the philanthropic community, as is the business community, into the strategic neighborhood fund. So he's identified yet another 10 neighborhoods. Southwest Detroit's exploding. I mean, so big areas, big parts of the city are coming back pretty fast. But there's certainly a lot of parts of the city, including the Near East Side by the airport and things like that. There's not a lot happening yet. And so I think there's a very delicate balance right now as to, you know, you can't invest in all of those areas at the same time. You don't have the resources, so, you know, you need to prioritize. And then in some areas, are you encouraging people that are on an isolated one person per block kind of circumstance to move into a neighborhood with greater density? I mean, I think that balance is taking place every day. So a lot of work to be done on that. And a lot of smart people are working on it, but it's a massive problem. I mean, you know, we were a city of 2 million people, and now we have a third of that. So by definition, and it wasn't a efficient sort of exodus, right? I mean, it was sort of from people all over went in different directions. So that's certainly an issue. The schools, look, I mean, there's nothing more important than the schools to the future of the city. And lots of people do live in the city now, and a lot of them are insisting on educational choices, and people are getting much more active in that. I think Dr. Vidi's doing a fine job. The business community and the philanthropic community, I think, are waiting to figure out how they intervene in an effective way, because there's been a lot of false starts. But if the city's going to be successful, not only to to attract people, as you suggest, but to make sure that all the kids graduating from there can take advantage of these jobs, the schools need to be better. So, you know, I think we have improvement in that regard, but that one it will be the most vexing of everything that we deal with, I think. Yeah.
First of all, thank you. Compliments. It's a great. Thank you for your personal efforts and leadership in creating this marvelous area for the whole world to come and see. Now that I frequent Detroit more often, one issue that my many friends feel is the lack of adequate parking. Because to bring people in without any business outcome, just to go around the city and come to eat, parking is a huge issue. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's interesting. I mean, I think we're aspirational relative to autonomous vehicles and things like that. Everyone is like, hey, people don't want to invest a ton of money in a big parking deck because they're confident the moment they cut the ribbon, you know, everything will be autonomous and the parking deck will be out of favor and so on. But right now, there's never been this much density in downtown, because even the office buildings, you know, when we were at the General Motors building, we were at 300 square foot per person. When General Motors moved to the Renaissance Center, we went to 175. Quicken's at 95, you know? I mean, so it's 10 by 10 and that includes bathrooms, conference rooms, everything else. So the density is off the charts. Transit's gonna have to be a part of the answer. But I honestly believe we're going to go through a period of a few years as this stuff comes online where the parking is going to be at a premium. And then I think the Ubers and the Lyfts and the different things will come to the forefront, but it's not going to get any better for a couple of years. But it's a good problem to have. It didn't used to be a problem getting a parking spot. You know, you could park on Woodward, you know, nobody cared. So it's a problem that we're confronting, but it's a nice dilemma, I guess.
The queue line. Now, it has shown that the density has increased. Shops have gone up on Woodward. Do you think that we're going to at least get the queue line to 8 Mile?
I think so. I mean, George, I think so. I mean, I think that the next step will be to take it into the north end up to like Hamtramck or something. And then I think the next one, going to 8 Mile isn't the answer. The next extension should go to 12 Mile or something beyond that, right? Because then you have a commuter system that gets you downtown from the suburbs and other things. So it's expensive, but we, I mean, it's demonstrated now the impact. I mean, if you extended the Q line M1 through the north neighborhoods, I mean, development would take off along the boulevard. I'm sorry, along Woodward. It really would. So I think people are definitely looking at it. I hope to retire from my transit role by then, so it's not going to be me, but a lot of people are putting a lot of energy into that.
I just want to say one thing on the schools. If we read the paper, the governor's trying to equalize the funding and young people. We just need to make sure we get out and vote, look at what she's doing, pay attention to where the money is being spent. Her two goals are roads and schools. That's her two goals. Pay attention to those and get behind it.
Good perspective. Are there any questions from the students that are here? Like, what time's lunch? Somebody must have one question back there.
Their teacher has a good question.
All right.
I know they're wondering this. You mentioned trade schools. Do you have any partnerships with any particular trade schools and small business owners? What are we doing to help small business owners to be able to afford to start a business down there?
Sure. I mean, the trade schools, we do. Randolph School and what's the other one? Breitling. So we broadly, the business community, and a lot of others are working with the trade schools. They're expanding dramatically. If any of the students are interested, I'd be happy to connect them because there is a absolute scarcity of skilled trades from a construction standpoint in our community. And I mean, if you're a master plumber or a carpenter or a steel worker, I mean, the opportunities are very, very significant to do very well. And we haven't even really started Hudson's or Monroe or the new bridge or all of this kind of stuff taking place. And so I would very much encourage people to do that. And I would be more than happy to give you my card and get any of your students connected into that area that have an interest. The startups, I mentioned Ross earlier. I mean, NEI, New Economy Initiative, there's all kinds of different activities that are taking place now. Wilson Foundation is funding a big initiative in that regard. We rock our, Ross is, I mean, so we can, again, be happy to put you into that sort of ecosystem because it was for a while we were trying to do sort of tech startups downtown. And that's cool, and that's all good, and that's working to some extent. There's a new angel investor group downtown, and there's a lot starting to take place on that. But I think what people found out is that it's equally important that all of these storefronts along 6 Mile and 7 Mile and, you know, everything else, Greenfield and all of these streets, that they had these vibrant communities. Retail was a big piece of that, and retail and sort of small business and that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of time, resources, and money being put into those now. And again, we'd be happy to connect you to people that are better versed in it than I am, but there's a lot taking place in that regard.
I'll be right down.
Quick little question. I was wondering, you was talking about all the restaurants and the buildings. What about the plants?
The plants, the manufacturing plants?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's a great question because that's what's changed in our community to a real significant extent, right? It used to be that if you would get out of high school in our region, you know, you would have, in many instances, the opportunity to go work for General Motors or Ford or Chrysler or something, and you'd be able to make a really good living, and that was sort of what we were as a community. And then when the sort of the challenges happened where the global economy took on General Motors, and General Motors went bankrupt, and Chrysler went bankrupt, and Ford nearly went bankrupt. I mean, that all changed, and labor became a smaller component of the cars. And even if you want to work in the plant now, for the most part, you need to have high school education and perhaps an undergrad, because it's a lot more technical now than it used to be. So I think, honestly, that's what's changed a lot in our community, and why it's been such a wrenching sort of change, because that whole way of life went away from a middle class standpoint, and now the way to be successful is doing what you guys are doing, which is, you know, banging away in school. And then the tech school is a great plan to do it, but there aren't many jobs that you can get out of school now at high school and make, you know, 50 or 60 grand and do that kind of thing. There aren't many of them. So it's really been a global economy thing, and a automation and an IT evolution that has taken place. So that doesn't exist anymore. And I think we need to make sure that you guys are positioning yourself for what is there. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi there.
Do you have any more plans for grocery stores? I didn't hear anything about any grocery stores, so I wanted to ask about that.
Sure, great question. I mean, until Whole Foods opened, there wasn't hardly a grocery store in the city of Detroit, and even Whole Foods opened this kind of little store because they didn't think it would be as successful as it has been, and they have now, I think, the highest grossing on a square footage basis Whole Foods in the city. I'm sorry, in the country is here. Myers did one right out on Grand River. Dennis Archer Jr. is doing another Meijer on Jefferson. I'll call it downtown, but just east of downtown. There's a couple of more that are being planned, so it's coming. I mean, there were none in the city. I mean, it was embarrassing, honestly. But there's a lot of demand now. I mean, Marvin Beatty, another friend of ours, did one just at 8 Mile. So we went from 0 to, I'll say 4 or 5, with more coming.
Hello. I also had a question about the homeless. I want to know how you guys would effectively deal with that.
Did you say homeless?
Yes.
Well, I always got to be careful. I kind of kidded earlier about the pronouns, right? So we rock do certain things, you know, and Quicken, but there's a lot of people in the homeless space, and there's a tremendous amount of work to do. For the most part, and I'm no expert in this, but for us, the problem is a significant component of the homeless are also are mentally ill and have different challenges, right? And they don't really have a good place to go. A lot of them won't go into shelters. It's not necessarily a lack of shelters. A lot of them don't feel safe in shelters, or they don't want to go in shelters. So they'll only go in shelters if it's 20 below, but they won't if it's 10 below, you know? I mean, so that's a whole book of work. I mean, the St. Peter and Paul downtown, the Jesuit church, is doing a Pope Francis Center, and they're doing a major initiative in that regard. Because you need, well, I think what people have found is a shelter isn't the answer by itself. You need to have a place where people can go, where they can be safe, where they can get medical care, where they can get, they can have an address so they can get an ID card or a driver's license or something so they can go get a job, so they can do those things. So there's a lot of it to be dealt with. I think a lot of it people are beginning to understand is tied to mental illness. A lot of the, 20 or 30 years ago, there was places and resources for some of those people. They shut them all down, and I think that was a mistake. And people are starting to sort it out. So I'm not here with an answer for that, but I can tell you that there's a lot of people that are putting a lot of resources to figure it out and to be helpful, because it's incredibly sad if you drive down on some of these days and you see people outside and trying to survive. It's not okay, and we got to figure it out.
Hello. I was wondering, for kids, in the wintertime, because there's always stuff in the summertime. What could we do in the wintertime?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Sorry. How we always have something in the wintertime, right? And how could we do something for the wintertime? I know we have ice skating, that area, but what more activities could we do?
That's a great question. I'm wide open for ideas. Very seriously. I mean, we did Winterfest. We're doing the ice skating. The belt this year, I mean, there's a lot of activities there. There's pop-up bars. There's different things that are taking place. I mean, I think we're starting to embrace it. more than we have, and it's getting better. From a riverfront standpoint, we have cross-country skiing. There's a hill there that we do sledding on, so there's more, but I agree with you. We need to find out, things to get people outside during the winter too. It's better, but we're wide open for any ideas. We'd love to hear some. And what would, be of interest to you and your friends to come down and do things, that'd be fun to talk about, because I don't know that we have all the answers yet. Yeah.
I'm hearing the comment more often that we don't have enough talent to fill jobs in Detroit. However, I beg to differ. And according to a TED Talk that I recently watched, online job boards, the success of them has actually declined, also due to computer programming filtering out really good resumes. Job fairs are in the city of Detroit. However, the companies show up and yet they're not hiring. So my question to you is, have you thought of more concentrated efforts to connect with good candidates for those higher paid positions in the city of Detroit where we will be able to afford to live in downtown Detroit?
Well, if we, ROC, or we, the business community, is not effective in engaging people that have the skills to work there, then we need to figure it out. And again, I'd be happy to give you my card and connect you with people that are working on that for us every day. I mean, we are talent starved in what's taking place in the city. We even started our own coding school at Grand Circus to teach kids how to code. Because in that instance, they don't have to go to college and they don't have to go to trade school. I mean, if they know how to code, we want them. We don't care what academic background they had. And so we spend a tremendous amount of time trying to find talented people in general. I mean, we scaled from 3,000 people to 17,000, right? So we haven't done that without hiring a lot of people. So love to hear if there's examples specific to us that we're not doing as well as we could. Love to hear them, and be more than happy to connect you with people that are day-to-day in that space, because we, and it's not just, I mean, again, the pronouns get confusing, right? But it's not just ROC, it's everyone else in town is trying to find, talented people. But there has to be a match of the skills and the opportunity, right? And that's what we need to make sure is taking place. I mean, which is an example back to the trade school where, here it is, you can make $100,000 and you can have a great job and you can, be in demand, and we don't have everybody to fill those roles. And so that, the mayor's got a job training, workforce development kind of group that's putting a ton of resources into that space, and we're a part of that. We're not, we're not leading it, but we're a part of that. So I think there's people to connect to that might be able to help either, if you have people like that, connect them in, or get the benefit of your perspective as how we can do better.
I think we got time for one more question.
Thank you so much. The presentations were amazing.
Thank you.
I do appreciate this. I was hoping to get mine in before the young people left, because you had actually spoke about the internships.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be one of their questions.
Yep.
So I'm Jean Overman. I run a STEM program out in Inkster, and we're trying to actually get our young people prepared to get in programs, like you said, with the internship. So do you have suggestions or a pathway that they should do to actually get in to that level of training?
Sure. So most of our kids are college kids, right? I mean, so, but the mayor, and again, I'm not the resident expert on this, but they have this summer employment thing with the youth in Detroit, and I don't know geographically if that includes Inkster or not. I don't know exactly the geographic boundaries. Okay. So we as a business community and a philanthropic community are putting a lot of resources behind that. I think there's going to be, and don't hold me to the numbers, 10,000 kids or something this summer. And so the idea is to get them, and you sound like you're in the forefront of it, so you know this better than I do, but to get them sort of job ready, and with the job skills, hey, you need to come every day, you need to do this, you need to do this, this is how, so that getting that instilled in them in high school and so on is really important. And then our internships are, and we'd love to talk to you relative to qualified students that you have, but our internships are specific to college kids that are, prepared and able to engage in the business community in one of these different areas of our business. And we have a lot of, they don't have to be programmers, we do a lot of different things. The other area we didn't talk about, but I mean, it's not a skilled trade per se, but the whole hospitality industry, I'll tell you something else. I mean, you cannot get people, I mean, cooks and waitresses and people that are, one of the roles I have is at the casino. But we're advertising every day for Shinola Hotel to get people to come and to work there. So again, I think a lot of it is just understanding where the demand is. I think Dave Meter and Cindy Paskey and the mayor's workforce development effort is a compelling one. I think we can all support that, and we can learn from it and learn from what you're doing. So, as you point out with the youth, if we don't give them opportunities, then we're not helping ourselves. We're not going to grow in an effective way. So, happy to talk about that as well.
Let's get all set, or?
No, that's it.
Okay. Let's give Matt another round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.